So I get a lot of questions here on the channel about ISAs, and that's why I'm doing this series of videos explaining how they work. The first one, which you can watch up here, a link up here and below, explains the different types of ISA, exactly what they are and how they work. This video though is going to look at allowances, how much you can pay into an ISA in a year and beyond that, and what happens if maybe you go over that allowance and so on, right? So this will be the next level to help you understand how to really maximize your ISAs. So let's kick off with what is the ISA allowance, and it's pretty clear, right? This is the amount of money that you can put into an ISA, and this allowance lasts for 12 months. It's for 1 year, but this is about how much you can pay in that year, okay? So it starts with a tax year on April the 6th every single year, and when that begins, you have a brand new allowance. Doesn't matter who you are, what you earn, as long as you're a UK resident over the age of 18. Well, some cash ISAs are available if you're 16 years old, but broadly speaking, if you're over the age of 18, you can pay up to £20,000 into your ISAs every year. For the next 12 months, that's how long you've got to pay in this £20,000 up to. Obviously, for most of us, we aren't going to be doing that, right? But that's how much the most you can put into it. And it's a pretty sizable amount, £20,000. That's been around that level since around 2017. So it's been a while now at that level. It actually started when ISAs first were introduced in 1999. It was around £7,000 when they launched, so a lot lower. But now it's grown gradually over time. And this is what it's going to be certainly this year, 2023, 2024. And it's currently set to be the same next year, 2024/2025, and potentially after that as well. Now, obviously, these things can change. So if you are watching this video in a later year, then do make sure you just double check to see if I've done an updated version of this video, or just have a quick Google and check what the ISA allowance is for that year. But £20,000 is the most you can pay into an ISA in a financial year, again, which starts on April the 6th. Now, that ISA allowance counts towards the 4 main types of ISA, which, as I say, you can hear more about in that other video that I mentioned at the top. These are the cash ISA, the stocks and shares ISA, the innovative finance ISA, and the lifetime ISA. This £20,000 allowance, though, is combined. There is not a separate £20,000 for cash, £20,000 for stocks and shares, £20,000 for innovative finance, £20,000 for lifetime ISA. It is £20,000 combined in a year. So if you do want to have more than one type of ISA, you have to ensure that those different contributions do not go over that £20,000 limit. And in fact, within that, there is a sub-limit on the lifetime ISA. That has its own £4,000 cap every single year. So if you are able to maximize the lifetime ISA and choose to every single year up to that £4,000, then that means the remaining allowance for those other ISAs is £16,000. You cannot put in 4 into lifetime ISAs and 20 into the others. No, it's 20 overall, and that's kind of cut out of it. If you imagine like a little square, that's the bottom. Now, how you divide either the full 20k amongst the other types or the remaining money if you've already had a lifetime ISA bit, that is up to you. You know, you can have 10k in cash, 10k in stocks and shares, 15k in innovative finance ISA, 5 in cash ISA, however you want to do it, right? But you've got to make sure you stick within that 20k. Now, what's also really important, this allowance, which again, it resets every single year and it is collective, but you can own, although you can pay into one of each different type within that allowance, you are not able to pay into more than one of the same type of ISA within that allowance. Okay, with that, when that year resets, so does where you're putting that money. Now, you might want to put that money into an existing ISA. That is fine. You can do that. Or you might want to put money into a new ISA. That is fine. But that £20,000 pretty much is going to be stuck with whichever of those ISAs you choose. So if you have put money into a brand new one, that is the only one you're going to be able to pay into of that type. Remember, you can split it across the different types of ISA. But if you put the money into one from a previous year, again, that £20,000 annual allowance will be attached to that account. So whichever type of ISA, that first time you pay into that type of ISA in the new financial year, that is where that allowance is tied to. There might be a kind of a slight workaround with this, which was potentially where you can transfer the money you've paid into the ISA this year, plus you'd probably have to transfer money from previous years as well, into a different one, and that will close down the existing ISA, the new ISA that you've got, and your allowance will carry on. But I'll deal with that kind of stuff when we talk a separate video about ISA transfers. One quick warning that is worth sharing with you here as well about that, which could impact which account your allowance is tied to, is if you are making regular payments every single month, it's a good way to make sure you keep saving, particularly when it comes to investing as well. Having a direct debit or a standing order that moves your money automatically out of your account into your ISA. This can be dangerous though if that automatic monthly payment comes in the new financial year, and you might find that it's the beginning of April, and I don't know, April the 12th or whatever it is, that payments come out as usual. They always come on the 12th of the month. You've just put 200 quid into your investment ISA. That's your investment ISA for the next 12 months. And if the same thing happens next year, that will repeat. And obviously you might want to be shopping around with investment ISAs for lower fees or access to different funds. Or with cash ISAs, you might want to be looking for one which pays a better rate of interest. So just be really careful of that. And I think if you have got regular payments set up, I would serve a note in my calendar before the beginning of March to say cancel direct debit, cancel standing order. So you've got that chance when April comes around, step back and think, right, what do I want to do? You can still pay in and reset that one up to the existing ISA if you want to, but you want to make sure that you have the potential to maximize that year's allowance at the best possible rate. Now, incidentally, if you are looking for the highest paying cash ISA accounts, make sure you head over to my website, becleverwithyourcash.com/savings. That's where myself and the team every single day, we're updating all the best cash savings accounts, including the best paying cash ISAs, easy access fixes. They're all in there. So that's how you're going to find out if you're going to beat the rate that you've currently got in one of these new accounts. Now, there is quickly one other allowance I want to quickly talk about before we carry on with the main ISA allowance. And this is the junior ISA allowance, because that is different to the main allowance I've just mentioned. This is separate. It's not linked into the £20,000 allowance you have. It is its own one, and it is £9,000 a year. I'm not going to cover junior ISAs too much in this one, but they're broadly going to work in that same way in terms of the allowances, but it's smaller at 9k, but you don't have to worry about mixing that up with, you've got a stocks and shares ISA for yourself and you want one for the kids, they can have a separate junior ISA on their own. Now, this ISA allowance, it lasts for a year, but that year doesn't start when you open the account or first make your payment. It is, as I mentioned before, tied to the financial year. The financial year starts, or the tax year, on April the 6th. Every year on April the 6th, you get a new allowance. That full £20,000 starts, runs around to April the 5th, and then it restarts again the next year. So if you open an account, I don't know, on the 31st of March and put some money in, let's say you put £5,000 in, well, that allowance will then reset a few days later, a week later, on April the 6th, and the new £20,000 is the most you can put in. If you don't use up some of that allowance, it does not carry over. It just disappears. And this is why you see a lot of people in the press, particularly around that kind of March time, say, make sure you use up your ISA allowance. Make sure you maximize your ISA allowance, because once it's gone, it's gone. Now, that is true. Once it's gone, it's gone. But I would say only ever really maximize that ISA if you need to put the money into there. A lot of people would say they don't need to be doing this because there are those separate tax-free allowances that you can get from savings, the personal savings allowance and savings, which might mean if you have a lower amounts of savings, it doesn't really make much difference to actually open up an ISA and have the money in there instead. Maximizing the ISA, that full £20,000 in there, is really only about people who have a lot of cash, a lot of money which they wish to put away, or people who are investing, in which case I think investing is probably, if you are doing that, you're better off using an ISA for your investing than a general investment account. But again, I cover that more in the other video. Broadly speaking, it's a limit, it's not a target, and it's not for everyone, but it will disappear if you don't use it. Now, that £20,000, it does reset every single year. And this means that potentially you could, and people are always, can I put 20k in year after year after year? And you absolutely can. You could put, if you wanted, £20,000 in on the 5th of April. And then, wouldn't that be lovely? The next day, April the 6th, if you got it, you can put another 20k in on the 6th of April. You can do that because your ISA allowance has reset for the new financial year. And as I said, if you do have a lot of money, it can be worth doing that, maximizing the money you have in an ISA, because rules can change. And once your money is in an ISA, it is tax-free. The gains you make, these savings, the gains, the dividends, they are tax-free for life, for as long as they stay within that ISA portfolio, the ISA wrapper sometimes referred to, it will remain tax-free. That could change, obviously, in the future. You never quite know. That could happen. But you'd imagine if they do change the rules, it might be for new money going into ISA rather than existing cash in there. So again, if you have a lot of cash, I absolutely would encourage you to try and take advantage of that full amount. Now, another question that people often ask me is, well, how much can I put into an ISA? And obviously there is the £20,000 annual limit, but is there a lifetime limit, more you can put in? And there isn't. You might find individual accounts have their own limit, how much you can put in there. And you might be thinking, but you can only put £20,000, so why would you have a limit? Well, that's because they say the following year, you might want to add more money in, and the year after that, more money. You might want to keep using the same ISA. Again, I think you should shop around, but if you do want to keep using the same ISA, or maybe you want to transfer money from previous years into a new ISA, again, so keeping it all in that tax-free status, but having it all in one place, potentially at a better rate, watch out for those individual limits. But potentially, let's say at 18, you've got 20K and you put 20K in every year for 50 years until you're 68. And I don't know who this person is. They're very lucky, obviously, but they would have £1 million in their ISA after those 50 years by putting for the full 20K in year after year. Obviously, the allowances would probably change if they even exist in 50 years' time. But that is £1 million potentially, right? That'd be fine. And that's before you have compound interest or any investment growth. So there could be even more than that. Okay, so really the only limits you're going to have are going to be the total amount that is limited by the actual savings provider. However, there is potentially another limit that I would suggest you look into here, and this is separate. This is particularly for any of them really. This is the Financial Services Compensation Scheme protection of £85,000 per financial institution. I've spoken about that in a separate video, so watch that one. It explains a little bit more. But this is if the bank was to go bust, the money where the place where your money is held was to go bust, you'd only be protected by the government up to 85K. So really, you want to make sure, yes, you can keep adding in 20K year after year after year if you want to, but actually you want to get at a certain point, you go, well, I'm going to take that money out and put it into a different one. And that might be why, again, you have different ISAs at different providers or different types of ISA. Again, not many of us are going to be doing that. But again, if you're doing this for a long time, that could easily be, achievable over a much longer period. You just put £1,000 in 1 year, because you're starting off, but 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years later, or you're doing it as joint savings, you might have more and more, and it's grown as well. By the time you actually get to a stage where maybe you want to use it, particularly with investment ones, you could be having large amounts in there. So just be wary of that. Now, something else that people often ask me about is what happens to your ISA allowance when an ISA matures. So a lot of people, if they put their ISA their money in a fixed cash ISA, it'd be locked away from anything from 1 year to 7 years. And when that bond or whatever it is, when that ISA matures, the money doesn't suddenly leave the ISA world. It doesn't stop being an ISA. What will happen is it will be probably converted into a very low paying, easy access cash ISA. But it's still an ISA. It's still protected as an ISA. Okay, remember that allowance is just about new money you can put in every single year. It is not about your overarching how much money is in there. Okay, so a fix is just about how long you get a rate for. It's not about how long it remains an ISA for. What you want to do, obviously, if it does have a fix, does mature, and you're suddenly in a low paying one, you're going to want to get it into a better paying one. And that's obviously where transfers come into play. And I said, I'm not going to talk about this a huge amount in this video. I will talk separately about transferring ISAs, how to do them. But what I do want to cover here as well is just to kind of, again, a question that often comes up is, if I transfer money from one ISA to a new ISA, which again, this is really important. The word transfer is about an actual process that the two banks do. If you withdraw your money from an ISA to a normal account and pay it back in, it will stop being an ISA, right? It's the money, once it's left an ISA, you've lost that power, okay? But if you transfer it across, you are not eating up the new allowance. So here's an example. Let's say you have got £30,000 you've saved up in ISAs over the last, I don't know, however many years, right? But you managed to have about 30K, but the rate you're getting is absolutely rubbish. You want to move it to a higher paying account. If you transfer it across to a different provider, and do check that they allow transfers. Not all ISA providers will allow transfers in. You transfer it across. That has not impacted your annual allowance for that year of £20,000. You can still, if you want to, pay 20K in to a new or existing ISA if you wish. Where you have to be careful here is if you transfer that 30K over and then add in money to that new account, if you're able to, that is your ISA for that year. And if that's a fix, that could be an issue because you've added money to a fixed cash ISA for a year, and they often then sometimes close the window where you can add money to it. If you haven't added in the full amount you want to, you're then going to be stopped from doing that. Okay, you can obviously look at a stocks and shares ISA or a limited finance ISA or a cash ISA if you're eligible or you're going to use it. But that's an important thing to remember there about the new money that you put in. Any time really, actually, not just if you transfer, but certainly if you're transferring across to an account. And also, it doesn't have to be transferring to an existing account. It can be a new one, and that new one can be separate to the one that you've transferred into. It can be separate to the new one you want for new money. Okay, remember that. So the allowance is just for new contributions, not transferring existing stuff. And the last thing to talk about here is a question that also comes up quite a lot is what happens if you do go over that ISA allowance for the year, that £20,000. More of that is paid in either because you just didn't realize, or maybe by accident, particularly if you've got like different types. You've got a cash ISA and a stocks and shares ISA. Maybe you're not quite, on par with which ones had the money where, and you go over that £20,000. What do you do? Well, the answer is do nothing. Wait, don't just withdraw the money because that'll get confusing. What you should do really here is ideally you contact HMRC. I've heard that that's quite difficult right now to get through to them. They do have an ISA helpline. At the time of recording this, that number for that was 0300 200 3300. You could call them up and ask them to kind of help you out and work out what to do. But if you don't even realize you've done it or you can't get through, they will sort it out at the other end. And effectively what they would likely do is maybe claim back any of the money back that you were due for that. So let's say you interest you earned, they claim back the tax on some of that interest. So the amount above what you would have earned, and that'll all be because the providers will be reporting this to HMRC. So again, a bit frustrating. If you do this, I mean, you obviously could contact the provider as well, get some guidance from them on what they should do. There might be something else you can do, but broadly speaking, it'll all come out when it comes to the kind of January, February time when the tax returns start coming through. So there you go. That's hopefully everything you need to know about ISA allowances. I will be doing another video shortly about transferring ISAs. As I mentioned, if you've got questions for those, do send them over to me. The best place to ask them is in our Facebook group. Head to becleverwithyourcash.com/community. Join us there, ask your questions, and I'll hopefully be able to include the answers in the next video in this series. My name's Andy Webb. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you check out these videos right here for more ways to boost your savings.